I, Scott Cawthon, have come up with the most brilliant scene in writing history. I'm going to have a flashback where our two main characters, Charlie and John, are going to be hanging out around this tree. They're both around the ages of 6. And then I'm going to have it that John tries to go over and kiss Charlie. It's going to be like true love's kiss.
Like that's ever gonna happen.
Hey guys, how's it going? And welcome back to another discussions video and another rewrite video, though this one's going to be a little bit different. So all my previous discussion video, well, okay, I can't say that. All the previous 5 discussion videos, all the recent ones, have been rewrite videos on FNAF games. So I've done like Security Breach, Sister Location, stuff like that. And I thought what would be fun is to do a little bit of like a mini series, like a subsection of the rewrite videos by rewriting the FNAF novel trilogy. And obviously that starts with this video and starts with the first book in the trilogy, The Silver Eyes. So that's what we're going to be doing here. And yeah, I don't like to usually waste too much time on these intros, so we're just going to kind of roll right on into things. Before we do, this is probably going to be a longer video. I wouldn't be surprised if it's an hour and a half to 2 hours, if not longer. I wouldn't be too surprised there. But don't quote me on that. I don't know how long it's going to be at this point. So in the event that it's going to be a really long video, I would definitely recommend probably doing something else while listening to this. I have noticed that you guys tend to listen to my videos rather than like straight up watch them, if you know what I mean. So I'm going to kind of cater towards that. It's going to be much more of a listening experience than it is going to be a watching experience. So be sure to go work on something else while having this play, because that's probably the easier thing to do. And you're also going to want to grab like a drink and a snack while you're working on whatever you're doing, unless you're at work and you can't do that, then I'm sorry. But you know, anyway, enough with this intro. Let's just roll into things. Don't forget to like and sub, because we need to reach 2,000 subscribers before August 14th. That's our goal. So we need to do that. Go like and sub, and let's just start off things with a little bit of a recap in rules for like recapping the Silver Eyes and what you can expect in this video. Alright, so before we get into the actual video itself, I think it's only fair that we recap the Silver Eyes, like go over the story, stuff like that. And then I also want to talk about a few overarching key points that I liked, and especially some things that I wasn't overly fond of from the book itself. Talk about how I'm going to change them, and then we'll get into the full actual rewrite story itself. So what happens in the Silver Eyes book, in case you haven't actually read it or, you know anything about it. So the Silver Eyes main character of the book is Charlie Emily, although she doesn't get a last name in the book. But Charlie is our main character, and she has a whole host of friends, ranging from people just named John, who's like the best character in the book, to other people, Jessica, Marla, Lamar, Carlton, and I think that's it. Jason's technically in there. He's like Marla's brother. I don't know. That's kind of their friend group. So the general story is that they're all getting back in town because they used to have a friend named Michael. He was part of the missing children's incident, and that was 10 years ago. So they're all part of this big like 10-year, or they're attending the 10-year memorial service thing. So they all go back to town to, you know, meet up again and go to the service. And the first night that they're there, they all decide to go look for Freddy's. They find Freddy's, they go hang out with Freddy's, and then the next day they go to the service, and immediately afterwards, it's weird. They talk about, during the service itself, they're like, maybe we should go to, like, we're so excited to go to Freddy's afterwards, despite the fact that Michael was last seen and killed in Freddy's, so I don't know why they want to go back there. But they all go back to Freddy's again, and then they run into Dave, the night guard, and he's like, yo, I'm Dave. I think I know a thing or two about this place. And he, you know, kind of tricks them. He kidnaps Carlton. Everybody thinks Carlton's just playing a prank. Well, his dad thinks that Carlton's playing a prank. And then they all actually realize that it wasn't a prank. Then they all go find Carlton. They spring lock Athen, and then they all go home. And Charlie says, I'm so sorry, John. this isn't gonna work out, and basically just dumps him. So that's the whole general story. You're not missing out that much. I mean, there's a lot more to it than that, but that's the general story. And to kind of get into things that I like and didn't like, overall, I actually didn't mind the book. I think it was a pretty decent read. There is some pacing issues, and I'll talk about that in the things that I didn't like. Aside from the pacing issues for some things, it overall read pretty fine. The writing was pretty decent, and all around it was a pretty good read. Like, it's one that if you're looking for a FNAF book to read, I would probably recommend it. I mean, I would recommend the trilogy as a whole, even though the other two books aren't nearly as great. But this is definitely a book that I could recommend to somebody if they're trying to get into the FNAF books. I would probably start with these, and this one in particular. It's pretty decent read. And other things that I like from it, character-wise, I kind of like the Charlie-John relationship. I'm a sucker for some romance stories, so I like their relationship. In this book, it's pretty good. Later on, it gets a little bit Willy Wonkus, but here, it's pretty good, and I like it for the most part. There's one particular issue I don't like with it, but we'll get to that. So their relationship's good. I like William Afton. I think he's really well done in this book. Like, he's written really good in this story. Both his Dave personality and his Afton personality, and how whenever he has the Spring Bonnie mask suit on, he acts completely different than he does when he's Dave. And how when he's like in Freddy's and he's doing all this kind of stuff, he's far more active and energetic. Whereas when he doesn't have his suit and all this kind of stuff, he's more like, oh, I'm just whatever. I like how he's written. He's written really well. He's actually really creepy. And he doesn't act like a supervillain. He's not like, whoa, how can I resist a promise such as this? And he's like trying to use pickup lines or whatever. Like, he's written really well in the book. So he's a big plus there. And that's really about it for things I like, which seems like it's not much. But when I actually describe it, it's like most of the book. So I like most of the book. Some things that I don't particularly like. I'll talk about the pacing in a second, but there is one specific scene and context that I think they should have just never bothered to even try to do. So there's a scene where Charlie and John go back to Charlie's old house, and they're reminiscing about before everything happened, and they were good friends back then too. And so they're just kind of reminiscing about that, and John would come over to her house every so often. And so they're right around 6 years old. The book says that they are 6 years old in this scene. So the scene portrays them playing some hide and seek. Charlie's hiding behind a tree or something, and John comes up and he finds her. And he's like, hey, I found you. Woo, whatever. And then super abruptly, like just right out of the blue, it's so weird. So just right away, John's like, hey, you know how like we see adults making out? Let's do that. And they're 6 years old. I don't know if it's just me. I find that very uncomfortable and very weird. I don't know why they decided to go this route. I mean, I don't remember like a ton when I was 6 years old, but I remember, if anything, I'd be like, ooh, you sit next to them in class, or, oh, dare even hold their hand, whoa. Or when I was 6, I was most likely concerned with like Ben 10, Star Wars, and like playing Lego. Like, I wasn't really concerned about this stuff, so it just seemed really weird, and I don't like it. So that's probably like that's a scene that I knew was gonna get cut like immediately, so that's not gonna be in here. So that's like the more specific scene I didn't like. Now with the pacing, I think the pacing in the book tends to be hit or miss. There's some parts where it's relatively slow and it works nice, and you kind of get to, establish yourself. And then there's other parts where it kind of just is like, we're doing this now, and it almost happens right away in the start of the book. One of the first scenes in the book is Charlie goes back to her old house, and she just explores the house on her own, and then she meets up with her friends. And then later on, she's like, John, I need you to come back with me to go to our house so that I can look around the house again, because I'm scared to look around the house despite the fact that I've already been there. So it just seems weird that she already explored her house and now she's doing it again. Like, it just seemed weird that we went there right away. Going to Freddy's, like, first night is really weird as well. It just seems like we're just kind of get thrown right into it. Like, oh, well, here we are. We're at Freddy's now, and we can just explore the whole thing. Look at that. We're here. Cool. It's just a little weird how fast things happen. That stuff, though, isn't terrible. I think the worst pacing is Fredbear's. So, in the book, there's a whole Fredbear's subplot of Charlie, like, literally in the middle of the book, Charlie just goes, hey, John, you know there was actually a restaurant before Freddy's? And John's like, really? Let's go find it. So they drive out and they go find it, and they're like, whoa, this place is called Fredbear's. They look around the old building a little bit. Charlie gets a little bit spooked by some old memories. They go back home. They go to a library to, you know, look through some newspapers to try to, I don't know, put the pieces together like Edwin Murray. And then it pretty much just gets dropped. Like, the only thing they really learn from any of this, like, B subplot thing is that Dave is most likely the business partner, William Afton, that worked with Henry, and they kind of put that together. But they don't even need to go to Fredbear's to do that. They didn't even need to know that it was called Fredbear's, because they go to the newspapers and they look up missing kid from this time and this year, and they find that news report about a missing kid, and then they go from there to get names and stuff like that. So it just felt really weird, and like, oh, we're just going to Fredbear's now. It just pops up, hey, we're at Fredbear's, and then now we're gone. I just, it didn't feel necessary, and it just felt so abrupt. So that's a big pacing issue I didn't like. Outside of that, I think like the last half of the book, for the most part, is pretty well done. They go to Freddy's, Carlton gets kidnapped, they leave. There is not a pacing issue, but like a writing choice that I think is kind of stupid. So Carlton gets kidnapped by Afton, and Jason sees Carlton get kidnapped by a yellow Bonnie, and they make note of that. Jason sees it's a yellow Bonnie, and he goes and he tells everybody else that, you know, the whole building's kind of freaking out, so they're all trying to leave. And Jason tells the whole group that Carlton got kidnapped by Bonnie, but he doesn't specify yellow Bonnie. So they all think that he's talking about regular bluish purple Bonnie on stage. And they're like, what are you talking about, dude? He's on stage. You're just a crazy kid. You don't know what you're talking about. Whereas if he had just said, yeah, a yellow Bonnie kidnapped Carlton, everybody would immediately have been like, oh, there's somebody else here. And especially like Charlie and John, like especially Charlie, she knew that there was a creepy dude in a yellow Bonnie costume. He was the same guy that kidnapped her brother. She would have known if Jason had just said yellow. It's just like, why didn't, like, it's a story choice that just doesn't make sense to me. Like, I get in the moment of panic, you might not bring it up, but you would bring it up. If they're like, no, Bonnie's on stage. And then he'd be like, no, not that Bonnie, it was a yellow Bonnie. And then all the pieces would fall into place. Like, it just seemed so arbitrarily set up for this thing to have Carlton be kidnapped and them not know what happened to him and them to think it was just a big prank. It just doesn't make a lot of sense story point, and so much so that I think his name's Chief Burke. I don't actually know if he has a first. I don't remember his first name. I'm just gonna call him Chief Burke. He's Carlton's dad. He's the one who came up with the idea that it was all just a big prank. And then the next day, Carlton's still not freaking home. It's an overnight. It's the next day, and the dad's like, oh, he's just pulling a prank. And he's talking to his wife, and his wife comes downstairs, and she's like, hey, where the heck is Carlton? And he's like, oh, he's probably just hiding out at Freddy's, pulling a prank. And immediately she's like, dude, what the heck are you talking about? Freddy's was where Michael got kidnapped. He would not pull a prank there. And then all the friends are like, oh, that's true, he wouldn't do that. And Carlton's dad's like, oh, I guess, you know, I still think it's a prank, but I guess if you say so, honey. Dude, none of these people have a freaking brain? Like, huh? It just doesn't make any sense. Like, the whole not pointing out yellow Bonnie and then everybody just assuming that it's a prank, despite the fact that this dude's best friend was freaking killed there. It just feels so like an arbitrary amount of conflict that doesn't need to be there. So that's kind of the biggest issues I have with, like, the story, the pacing, that kind of stuff. It just, some parts just felt so unnecessary for the sake of just, like, extending the plot forward for one reason or another. They just wanted a scene where Carlton got talked to by Afton in a Springlock suit, and nobody know where he is. It just felt a little weird. So the biggest changes I'm doing are going to be mostly just removing those things or changing them to make at least a little bit more sense, hopefully. And you'll see that in the story. Obviously, if you haven't read the original Silver Eyes, you won't notice as many other changes that I'm doing, but I do plan on talking about all the changes I did in a behind the discussions video that's going to come out tomorrow for you guys watching this. So stay tuned for that, because that'll go over all the major changes. But I've done enough talking about this for right now. We need to get into the story, because it's probably going to be a really long one. So enough said with that. Time to get into the actual story. First, though, a little bit of how this video is going to go. So usually my discussion videos are broken down into like different sections or chapters or stuff like that. And well, coincidentally, breaking them down into chapters would make a lot more sense for this kind of video. I'm going to just be reading through the entire thing in one sitting, quote unquote. I'm going to record it in separate sections, but I'm going to piece it together in one large story reading. That way it's a bit of a smoother experience, and there's not really any like breakups between sections, because it's all just a big story reading. So I'm just going to read it all through as one gigantic reading, and there's not really going to be a whole lot of visual elements here, because there's only a handful of pictures I can get, and most of them suck. So I have a fun little animated graphic that's going to be put up, and obviously most of you people, well, hopefully most of you people are just listening to this. That's kind of the hope, and I'm just sort of trying something out. If you people want, I see you people like you guys are bad people. If you guys want, you know, more graphics, like if you want me to go back to more graphics and not the sort of animated picture thing, then just let me know. I'm just trying out something new. So anyway, enough said, enough blabbering about this. Let's get into the story. That's why you guys are here. Let's do this one last time. We'll start it from the beginning with chapter 1. We start off our story in the year of 1985, and we find ourselves at a very busy Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. It's like a midsummer day, and there's no school, so the place is super busy with kids, parents running around looking for their kids. It's a big, loud, noisy, crazy time here at the pizzeria. And we focus in on our main group of friends. We have Marla, Lamar, Jessica, Carlton, Michael, John, and Charlie. And they're all around the ages of 8 or 9, somewhere in there. And they're all deciding about what they want to do. They're like, oh, well, we should play a game. What do we want to do? And decide on a game of hide and seek. John ends up being chosen as the seeker, and so the friend group all splits up, and we follow Charlie as she goes into one of the side arcade rooms and hides behind an arcade machine. And after a few minutes, John runs into the room, and he's like, I know you're in here, and he's looking around for Charlie, and eventually he finds her hiding behind the arcade machine. And she gets up to leave because she got found, and as she's leaving, she trips on a power cord and kind of like side tackles John, and they both fall over onto the ground, and they both shoot up really quick, and Charlie's kind of like smiling and blushing a little bit, and John's kind of like awkward. He's like, oh, you know, whatever, because there's a little thing there maybe. And then we move on, and they're both running out of the room. They're like, all right, let's go find the others. And they're running out, and they run back to the main party room. But all the busy noise and all the craziness has stopped. Everybody's just standing still, staring at the stage. So we look over to the stage, and Chica and Bonnie are like freaking out. They're flailing their arms around. They're going crazy. It's relatively quiet, but you can hear the squeaking of the parts around, and they're going crazy. And Freddy's just standing still, staring down at the crowd. He's not moving. He's just staring at the crowd. And Charlie and John kind of look at each other. And then Jessica and some of the other friends run over, and they're like, we haven't seen Michael. Has anybody seen Michael? And that's when a parent runs into the room and is like, I can't find my kid anywhere. Has anybody seen my kid? I looked over all the rooms and I haven't been able to find them. And then another parent, I can't find my kid either. And that's when panic ensues, because now kids are going missing. What the heck's happening? The animatronics are freaking out. There's kids missing. What in the great goodness gracious is happening here? So parents are running over and grabbing their kids, making sure that they're grabbing their kids, but then other parents are being skeptical, like, is that really your kid? And it's all out chaos. Jessica's mom runs up and scoops up Jessica and gets the heck out of there. John's mom runs in and grabs John's hand to lead him out of there, and John takes Charlie's hand because They just need to get the heck out of there. So they're both running out of there, and Charlie turns and looks down a staff-only hallway where the doors are still kind of swinging and open and closed. And at the end of the hallway, she just sees a man in a yellow rabbit costume staring down the hallway back at her, and they lock eyes for just a split second. And then she continues running out of the building. And as they run out into the parking lot and away from the building, that's the last time that she ever was in Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, and the last time she was in Hurricane, Utah. We pick back up with Charlie driving back into Hurricane, passing the sign that says, "Welcome to Hurricane, Utah." It's been 10 years since the event, and she's coming back along with the friend group to honor the 10 years since Michael and the other kids went missing. On the same note, Charlie's also coming back because it's been 10 years since her father went missing as well, as he had gone missing the same day. And while thinking about her past, her father, and everything that happened, she decides that she's going to stop by her old house because she feels that that's what she needs to do. And as she pulls into the driveway and pulls up to the old house, she gets out of the car and then stops. She hesitates, she thinks about it, and she just doesn't have the power, the will in her to actually go into the house and experience all these memories that she's been not thinking about, almost repressing for all these years. And she gets back in her car and drives off. She's got to go to the diner anyway to meet up with her friends. John stayed in town, his family never moved. Carlton and Jessica are back in town, and they are the first ones to arrive. Marlo's supposed to arrive tomorrow, and Lamar, who the heck knows when he's going to show up. So Charlie drives her way down to the diner, and as she's driving there, she's thinking about her friends. It's been a while since she's seen Jessica, and they didn't write all that often, but what she remembers about Jessica is that she was a bit bossy, but she was also somewhat kind and sweet and smart. Carlton, he was like the comic relief kind of guy. He was pretty funny. And John, oh man, there's something dreamy about John. She just has something, there's just something there. She can't stop thinking about John. They stayed in touch after all the 10 years. They kept in constant contact, and she just can't seem to shake this feeling about him. There's just something about John that she likes. As she pulls into the parking lot of the diner, she parks, gets out, and begins to head towards the diner. As she walks up, in the window she can see the three friends sitting at a booth chatting it up with each other, and she walks to the door, and almost immediately the three friends stand up. Jessica turns and is like, "Charlie!" He runs over and gives her a huge hug. Carlton walks up and he's like, "Hey, Charlie," and gives her like one of those handshake side kind of hugs. And then John walks up and he's kind of awkward. He's kind of like, oh, you know, he's kind of like fiddled with his hand. He's kind of awkward. He's looking down and he's like, "Hi, Charlotte," because that's their little thing. He calls her Charlotte. That's their kind of cute little thing. And he kind of reaches his hand out for a handshake. He doesn't know what he wants to do, so he reaches out for a handshake. And Charlie's like, "What the heck is this? A freaking business meeting?" And gives him a huge hug. And he's kind of like, "Oh, you know, whatever." But as she's giving him a hug, looks over his shoulder and sees Carlton and Jessica kind of like whispering to each other, and they're looking over and they're kind of smiling about it. And the two sit down, and John and Charlie sit down next to each other in the booth, and it's time for just some catching up. They're talking. Charlie brings up what she's going to be doing, which is not much. She doesn't have any plans. Just graduated high school, doesn't really have any plans for college yet. Jessica says that she's actually going to college in Cedar City, which is about a 40-minute drive north from Hurricane. Carlton says he's also going to be going into college, though not anywhere in Utah, and he's going to be going in for acting and comedy and that kind of stuff. John also doesn't really have any plans for college. He doesn't know what he wants to do, but he is working a construction job in town with whatever construction company is there. And he actually owns his own apartment because the second he graduated high school, he basically was forced to move out, and his parents just said, "All right, cool, you can live on your own. We're dipping the heck out of here." And they just left. So John just got basically abandoned in Hurricane. But he's got his own little apartment, he's got his own job, and he's kind of doing well for himself. So they all kind of catch up some more, they do some talking, and eventually Carlton asks John whatever happened to Freddy's, because of course Freddy's going to get brought up. It's just kind of obvious. So he asks, and John kind of like looks like a little shocked. He's a little awkward, and he looks over to Charlie like, "Is this okay to talk about?" And Carlton's kind of like, "Oh yeah, I didn't really didn't really think that one through all that much. And Charlie's like, it's not a big deal. We can talk about it. It's fine. I kind of want to know too. What the heck happened to Freddy's? It was a big part of my life. I want to know. So they all kind of sit there and chat for a minute. And John talks about, like, he doesn't really know what happened to Freddy's. He knows where it was and that something got built over top of it. But that got, kind of canceled and abandoned halfway through because of a crazy storm that came in and the project lost funding. So whatever they were building is about half finished and never really got completed. And he doesn't know if they actually tore the building down or if they just built over top of it or what. He doesn't really know what happened to Freddy's. And so Jessica kind of pipes in and is like, hey, maybe we should go check it out, see what's there. And they all kind of agree. They're like, we don't really got anything else going on today. Let's go check it out. So they all drive out there, and John has to catch a ride with Charlie because he walked to the diner. It's like a 5-minute walk from his apartment. So he walked there, and he's like, I didn't drive, but it's a bit of a drive to the location. Can I hitch a ride with you? And she's like, oh yeah, sure. So they all drive out there, and they're kind of talking on the way there. They pull up to the location. They get out, and they see that it looks like it was some sort of mall that got abandoned halfway through. And Jessica's kind of the eager one. Jessica's like, maybe we should go and investigate. And Carlton's kind of on board. He's like, yeah, that kind of sounds fun. And John's like, well, does anybody have any flashlights? Carlton's like, yeah, I got one in my car. And Charlie's like, yeah, my aunt made me pack one because she's always so paranoid about me. They both grab the flashlights and they start walking up to the building. They're looking around. They're just kind of investigating. They're not really seeing anything too crazy. They're like, this was where Freddy's was. They clearly just built over top of it. Now, did they build around it or did they tear it down? Who really knows? They don't know yet, but they're looking around. And eventually, in the distance, they see another flashlight that's kind of heading towards them. So they kill the lights and they're like, we got to get the heck out of here. So they start running out of there. But as they're leaving, Jessica takes a look at the hallway that they're running through and realizes that there should be a storefront here. There's a large section of wall that looks like there should be a storefront here, but there's no entrance. There's no anything that would indicate that there's actually supposed to be a room there. It's just a big sort of boxed off wall. And she's kind of got that in the back of her mind, like, there seems to be something here that's supposed to look like there's nothing here. She's kind of interested about that. And when they leave, she notices on the outside of the building too that there is space for some sort of large room structure, but there wasn't any indication of there actually being a room in the building. So she's kind of starting to question the architecture of the building. Maybe there's actually something to this that they missed. So they all run out of there though, and they all drive off. Charlie and John pull into the parking lot of his apartment, and John gets out and walks over to Charlie's window, and he's kind of like, hey, thanks for driving me around, and it's really good to see you again, and hopefully we can do some more catching up. And she's like, yeah, it's really great to see you too, John. Have a good rest of your night. He walks off. She drives back to her motel room, and everybody kind of has their own motel room. So Jessica has her own, and Charlie got her own motel room. So she goes in and she kind of checks in, gets to her room, unpacks a little bit, settles in, gets ready for bed, and she climbs into bed and almost immediately falls asleep. It's been a long day, a lot of driving, all that kind of stuff, and she just basically falls asleep right away. And her dream begins at Freddy's. She finds herself back at Freddy's, back on that day that Michael was taken, and back on that memory of a yellow rabbit standing and just staring at her. This terrifying yellow rabbit and its creepy looking eyes. But then the memory shifts. It starts to change, fade. And it fades into a memory of a different location, a different restaurant. We aren't at Freddy's anymore. She finds herself now staring at a large, present-looking prize box with the lid open on the floor. The box is empty, and the door to outside is open. It's been left open. And then she shoots awake in the middle of the night. She just shoots up awake in bed, startled by the dream, this memory that she hasn't had in a long time. And she shoots up and she's like, oh, what the heck happened? She turns to her clock and it's like 2:33. And she's like, I really need to figure out what the heck I just had a memory of. Like, it's something that I know, but I don't recognize it, and I need to figure this out. But 2:33 in the morning is a little too early. So she tries to go back to sleep. And she does. She falls back asleep and gets jolted awake again by somebody banging on her door. And it's now like 9 in the morning. And she's like, I guess, that's fine to get up. And so she walks over to the door, still kind of groggy, opens it, and it's Jessica. And Jessica's like jumping up and down, super excited. She's like, I need to talk to you about something like super important. We need to talk about this. And Charlie's like, hey, like, you just woke me up. I just got out of bed. Can you like calm down a minute? And so Jessica runs in. Charlie kind of gets ready for the day and comes back out and starts talking to Jessica. And the two just sort of start talking about just small talk. They're talking about life. They're talking about what they're gonna do that day. Jessica talks about John. Ooh, what are you doing with John, Charlie? And she's kind of like, let's not talk about that right now. And then Jessica's like, all right, I'm actually here to talk to you about the fact that I think that Freddy's is still there. I think they built a mall around Freddy's, but I think it's still there. Something about the architecture was off, but I just have a feeling, I got that feeling that the building is still there. Freddy's is still up. And Charlie's like, I kind of agree, actually. Like, and you don't really notice it, but I got a feeling as well that there is something remaining of Freddy's and we need to figure it out. So they both are like, yeah, we should probably go back and investigate further. Our investigation got cut short the first time. Let's go back later tonight, because you always gotta go back at night and see if we can figure this out. But for right now, we'll just go and have a fun day. And Jessica's like, I'm actually gonna go around town, go explore some of the old sites and just sort of hang out. And Charlie's like, actually, I, was gonna go hang out with John. I needed his help on something. And Jessica's kind of like, ooh, what do you need his help with? And Charlie's like, stop bothering me. Get the heck out of here. I need to plan. So Jessica leaves, and Charlie calls on John and is like, actually, yeah, I didn't confirm this with you, but I do need your help. And John's like, what's up? What are we doing? And Charlie's like, I want you to come back with me to my old house. I think it's time for me to finally go back there, but I can't do it alone. I need your help. And John's like, all right, just come pick me up. I'll be ready. So they pull up to the old house, they go in the driveway, and they make their way up to the house itself. And Charlie's ready to open the door, but hesitates and kind of looks over to John, and John's like, you know what, fine, I'll open the door. So he opens up the door, and while the house isn't in a terrible condition, it's also not great. It's got holes in the windows, there's some holes in the ceiling, there's some leaks in places. It's not great, but it could be worse. The biggest issue is a lot of dust and cobwebs. And so they're kind of looking around, and John's just exploring on his own. He goes off and is just kind of exploring the place. But Charlie has her mind set on checking her old room. So she just heads right up there to her old room, opens the door, and finds that even though there's a lot of dust and cobwebs around, it's really almost fully intact in the same way that she left it. And she looks around, she sees her old bed with her faded green coverings, and she looks over to the opposing wall and sees the lineup of 4 closet doors that she has against her wall. And she never really thought about how odd it was that she just has 4 closets in her room, and she didn't really think about that till now. She's like, oh, that's kind of odd. But she goes over to each door and she opens the first one, and she finds that Ella is still in there waiting for her. And she's like, oh, I kind of didn't think you'd be here, although it makes sense that you're here because it's not like you can really go anywhere. So she notices that the button for Ella is still next to the door. She presses the button, and Ella doesn't move. It's just been too long, and there's just not anything left for her to actually be able to function. And Charlie's like, it's a bit of a bummer, but it's good to see you. She opens up the second closet door, and it's nothing but just toys and clothes and whatever you'd find in a regular closet. She's like, whatever. She opens up the third closet door, and it's completely empty. There's nothing in there. It's just completely empty. And she's like, that's a little bit odd, but, maybe I didn't put anything in here. And she goes to try to open the fourth closet door, and it's locked. She can't open it, and she's like, that's weird. It needs a key, and I don't know where the heck that would be. I can't seem to open this door. And she's like, all right, well, that's really about it for me to do in here. She turns to leave, and John's like standing in the doorway, just kind of like looking into the room. And she's like, oh, goodness gracious, Johnny, you caught me off guard. Like, geez Louise. And John's kind of like, oh, no, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare you. And then the two kind of just start talking about all the memories when John would come over and was super fascinated about all the fancy little toys that Charlie would have in her room, like Ella. They have, I think it's Stanley, the little unicorn thing. You got Theodore, all the fancy little toys that Charlie used to have. And John was just so fascinated about all the robotics and all the mechanics behind it. And then they get talking about more memories that they have of when John would come over and how they would, hang out and run around and sneak into Henry's workshop when he wasn't looking, and how they would, look at all the prototype animatronics, and it kind of scare Charlie, but John found it kind of cool. And there's absolutely no kissing in any of these memories. And with the mention of the workshop, John kind of gets the idea of like, hey, maybe we should check out the workshop next. And Charlie's like, yeah, that's fine, we'll do that. So they head back out of the house because the workshop is a separate shed next to the house. So they walk over there and make their way into the building. It's not locked or anything. They just walk right on in. But the interesting thing is that it looks like somebody quickly grabbed a bunch of stuff and just sort of ran out of the building. But like back 10 years ago, because it's all covered in dust. But it looks like somebody had been there and disturbed the location before leaving, which wasn't noticed with the rest of the house. The rest of the house is exactly how it was left when Charlie remembered it, but the workshop has been run through. And she kind of takes note of that, but is like, maybe Henry just left the place in a mess on that day he disappeared. And they kind of look around, they're looking at things, and there's really not a lot there. There's not a lot left, there's not much left. But what she does notice is in a box in one of the corners is a photo album, an old family photo album. She takes it, she doesn't open it, and she doesn't tell John. She's like, I'm gonna just take this and hold on to this for the future, because maybe I'll want to look through this, just not right now, and I don't want to tell John about this. So she takes the book, and the two decide like, hey, it's getting a little bit late. We said we were gonna meet up at the diner because Marla's probably in town. Let's head out of here. So they leave, and Charlie kind of just throws the book in the back of her car, and they drive off to the diner. They show up and see that everybody's already there. Marla showed up a little bit earlier than they expected, and they both walk in. Marla, of course, super big, like, whoa, hey, good to see you guys, super big hug. And she also says like, hey, I had to bring Jason along. And they see Jason, he's sitting in another booth, and he kind of looks up and waves, and then goes back to playing whatever game he's playing. And Marla kind of then lowers her voice and then talks about why she had to bring Jason along, with like, her parents are constantly fighting, it's not looking good for them, and she just doesn't want to leave Jason around with all that going on. So that's why she brought him here, and make sure that they know, but Jason doesn't know that's why he's here. And John and Charlie are kind of like, all right, cool, thanks for the information, I guess. But they all kind of sit down, they talk, they do some catching up, and Jessica, of course, being over eager about going back to Freddy's, brings it up almost right away. And Marla's like, wait, you guys think Freddy's still around? Yeah, we gotta go check that out. And John and Carlton are kind of like, wait, but you didn't really tell us about this. You think Freddy's is there? And we're gonna go back? I guess we're in on this now. So they all go back to Freddy's, well, to the mall where Freddy's is supposedly. And this time they have another flashlight because it's a larger group. And they all start looking around, and Jessica kind of leads them to where she thinks it is. And they're looking around, they're looking through maintenance hallways. They're kind of just trying to find any semblance that there's a building inside of this room. And Charlie actually goes down. There's a little hole in one of the walls that you can still kind of see through into this maintenance area. There's a lot of like wiring and pipes back there. And she sees a metal door with super faded text that says, staff only, Fazbear Entertainment. And she's like, I found it. I found the door to Freddy's. And she gets everybody over there, and John and Carlton try to open the door, but it's just jammed. There's something that just jammed the door. They can't open it. And John's like, well, I could get some power tools from the construction site, but I, would need to do that without them knowing. And I can't exactly do that right now because everything's locked up. And I can't do that during the day because everybody's out there. So he's like, we're going to have to come back tomorrow night in order for me to open the door with the power tools. There's no way in the world that we're getting this open tonight. Everybody's kind of bummed because they can't really do anything, but they're also super excited that they found Freddy's. And they all walk out of there, and they're all talking, and they're all super hyped that like, hey, tomorrow we're finally going to check out Freddy's. And as they're leaving and they walk back out to the cars, Charlie kind of notices that there wasn't any sign of a night guard. There wasn't any other flashlights. They didn't hear any other footsteps. There wasn't a sign that somebody else was there. It kind of makes her a little bit confused, but yeah, maybe he was in a different part of the location. Who knows? She doesn't really think too much of it, but she kind of notices that. They all drive home. Charlie drops John back off at his apartment, and John's kind of like, hey, if you ever want like a tour of the place, you can always, stay for a little bit and I can show you around the apartment. And Charlie's like, yeah, you know, obviously not tonight, but maybe I'll take you up on that offer at some point. She drives back to her hotel room, and she falls back asleep. Charlie finds herself back in her dad's workshop, and she's a little girl again, and she sees Henry working away on the desk, and everything's back to the way it was 10 years ago. She's a little confused, and she starts looking around the workshop, and she looks over and she sees in the corner that terrible creature with its terrible shining eyes just standing in the corner. Those horrible silver eyes turn and they stare at her. She remembers these eyes. These are something that will stick with her for the rest of her life. She gets startled and turns back to Henry to get his attention, being like, Dad, you know, the scary thing's looking at me again. But as she turns back, she's face to face with the yellow rabbit. And she shoots up again, wakes up in the morning, super startled, and finds that it's about an hour until the ceremony starts. She kind of overslept a bit, and so she quickly gets up, recollects herself, and finds something nice to wear. Nothing too fancy, just not like a jean and a sweatshirt, like something nice. And makes her way to the diner for breakfast with everybody. She's a little bit late for that, but she gets there, meets up with the rest of the group, and Lamar's there. He had actually flown into Cedar City earlier in the morning and then had to rent a car and drive all the way down here like super early, so he's like pretty exhausted, but he made it here. And so they all catch up, they're all talking with Lamar, and of course they bring up Freddy's and like, hey, we're gonna go back there later tonight. And Lamar's like, oh, Freddy's, I remember that place, cool, we'll do that, but let's go to the ceremony. So they all drive off to the ceremony, and they go to the old school, and they all park, and they're getting out, and John's kind of like walking in, and he decided to go fancy. He's going like button-up shirt, tie, he's going pretty fancy, and he's trying to get the tie right, but he just can't get it. They're all walking up, and he's just fiddling with it. He can't quite get the tie right. He just can't figure it out. So Charlie walks over, and she's like, you know, I've done this before. Does the fancy thing. I don't know how to tie, but she does the fancy thing, ties the tie, and everybody's kind of like, ooh, you know, she's helping him out, and John's kind of blushing a little bit, and Charlie's like, it's not a big deal, who the heck cares? So she helps him out, and then they all walk in, and they all sit down, and the ceremony goes on, and they all talk about, oh, you know, it's been 10 years since Michael and everybody else, you know, went missing. And they're like, oh, you know, it's just super sad. They have all the parents come up, and at least all the parents that are still in town. Michael's parents go up, give a little speech. Carlton actually goes up, does a little bit of talking, brings up Michael. And they all kind of just, you know, remember, and it's all just a big kind of sad, somber ceremony. But a little bit of like, hey, you know, at least we're all still here and together to remember Michael. And then they all kind of get to, it's not really a reception, but like whatever would be after the main ceremony event. Maybe it's a reception, I don't know. And they're all kind of hanging out, they're all talking. Some people talk with Michael's parents, and they're all kind of just hanging out. And Marla and Jessica are like jumping up and down, like, let's go back to Freddy's, we need to go back to Freddy's. And everybody else has to remind them, like, hey, we're not going to go right now, because one, we're at the freaking ceremony for Michael, we're not going to do this right now. And two, it's still the daytime, we got to go at night because John has to get the power tools. We're not going to go right now, just calm down. And they all agree that, all right, we'll find something to do during the day, but we'll all meet back at the mall at 9 o'clock at night. That's when John can get the tools and get over there, and that's just their agreed upon time. So they're like, all right, let's all go do our thing. We'll meet back here at 9. And Charlie's kind of like, John, I need your help again. I want to take you up on that apartment tour. Let's go to your apartment. And John's kind of like, okay, this is out of the blue, but fine, we'll go there. So they drive over to his apartment, and she takes the book that she had grabbed, and she walks with John up to his apartment. He kind of like shows her around, like, you know, it's not anything fancy. Here's the living room. I have a separate bedroom over there, and there's the bathroom, and that's really about it. So he's like, hey, you know, it's not much, but you know, it's not bad. And she's kind of like, all right, cool. Yeah, this is cool. Anyway, I have this photo album that I think we should look through, and I want to tell you about my past. So she does a little bit of talking, like, hey, did you know that, you know, there's a lot more to Freddy's and my family than just this one restaurant. And in fact, there was a restaurant beforehand. And she kind of opens up the book, and she flips through some photos, and John notices that there's a family photo too, and sees that there's 4 people in the family. And Charlie's like, yeah, I didn't really bring that up, but I do have, or had, a twin brother. And John's kind of like, oh, I'm sorry, I never knew. And then that's when she's like, yeah, that was back at the old restaurant, but something happened, and all my parents told me was that he was taken from us. That's all I know. And we never found out who did it. The police investigated. They never found the culprit. Everything just kind of got left open, and there's a lot more to the event than people tell me. And she's kind of just like continuing to struggle with, remembering the events, and a lot of the memories are repressed. She was also young, like 3. It was just a crazy time for her family, and she doesn't remember everything that happened. But she also remembers that time as well, she lost her brother, and her mom also was taken from them. And so that's why Henry and Charlie moved. They moved here, and Henry made Freddy's as the new place. And so she kind of keeps talking with John about all this past, and eventually they keep flipping through the book, and they're looking around, and they see a photo of 2 men standing in front of a building that says Fredbear's Family Diner on a big sign over top of it. And Charlie's like, that's what it was called. Right, I remember now. And she looks at the photo with the 2 men, and they're both kind of looking at this, and she's like, well, that one's clearly my dad. And there's a picture of Henry. He's standing there. He's got his arm around the Fredbear mask, and he's wearing the full Fredbear suit, the yellow bear suit with a purple bow tie and a purple top hat, and he's standing there. And next to him is another man that she doesn't recognize. He's a bit of a larger man, clean-shaven, shorter brown hair, doesn't really recognize him, but he's wearing a similar yellow suit with a larger purple bow tie, and underneath of his other arm is a yellow rabbit mask. And she immediately puts the pieces together, just like Edwin Murray, of like, this guy is the same yellow rabbit that I saw at Freddy's. He was at Fredbear's, and he followed us here. And she kind of gets a little bit overwhelmed of like, whoever this man is knew my dad, and most likely was involved with whatever horrible events happened here, because my brother is taken from us at Fredbear's, and he was there, and then 5 kids go missing at Freddy's, and he's also there. There has to be some major connection here. There has to be something that connects this guy with all the horrible events that happen. And so she's kind of getting a little bit overwhelmed by all the memories. John's like, hey, they're there. It's okay. We'll figure this out. And now both of them are like super determined to go to Freddy's again, because maybe there will be some answers there. Maybe she can get some closure on some of this stuff in her life that she just didn't have closure on before. So now they're both super determined to get there and get answers. Some more time passes, and eventually gets to the time where they're all supposed to meet there. They all drive down there. John and Charlie drove separately because John had to grab the power tools. They show up, and they all get out. They grab some flashlights. They walk over to the place where the door is, and John gets his power tools out and starts working away at the door, and it's making like a crap ton of noise. And Jessica and Lamar are both kind of like the paranoid ones, looking out like, hey, is the guard gonna show up? And John's like, oh, who the heck cares? So they're like working at the door, and eventually he gets it, and the door like kind of pops open and like off the hinges and like crashes to the floor. Like just a ton of crazy noise happens all at once, and John's kind of like got that like shrug awkward of like, ooh, that was a little bit too much noise. And then they see the flashlight turn on the hallway, and like somebody walking rather fast towards where they are, and they're like, shoot, we gotta like no time to hide. So they all turn the flashlights off, and they all kind of just run behind some places. They either hide behind some walls, behind some shelves, and Charlie's kind of like the last one standing there, and she sees a stack of boxes and like runs / like slides, and also a little bit dives behind these boxes. But John's back there already, so she kind of like crashes into him and is kind of like just falling on top of him, and he has to like catch himself from completely falling over. But they all just kind of freeze, and they see the flashlight enter the room, and they hear the guard kind of like jog in, and he's kind of looking around, and he's like, anybody in here? And he's looking around, and they see the light going over everything, but he doesn't really investigate. He kind of just looks around for a bit, and then he leaves. He walks off, and they wait a second, and they wait another second, and then everybody kind of gets back up again, and they're like, that was something else. And John's kind of got that like, he's kind of like blushing, flushing a little bit of like, That was a bit of an awkward situation. Charlie's kind of giving him a little nudge of like, dude, come on, grow up a little bit. It's not that bad. And she's also blushing a little bit, but she's like, hey, it's not that bad. And the group all kind of like regroups, and they're like, all right, we got the door open. It's time to enter Freddy's. And they all make their way into the restaurant. As they're walking through the old hallways, they look around and see a lot of doors that lead into staff-only areas or other random offices that none of the people in the group decide to go into because they're all just sticking together. Eventually, they come to a set of like double doors that John pushes open and reveals the main party room. The group all walks in, and Carlton's the first one to kind of head towards the stage and turns his flashlight over there. And that's when they realize that all of the animatronics are still standing on stage, exactly where they were all those years ago. The group is kind of shocked, but also not too surprised, because who would have come in here to move them around? They all get a bit closer to just kind of get like a better look at the animatronics and see that time hasn't been too friendly to them. The animatronics' outer fur has been torn and damaged in other places. The robots have accumulated a massive amount of dust, and there's a lot of other wear and tear that's happened to them throughout the 10 years that they've been standing on this stage. The group then decides that they're going to all just kind of take a look around. They're all kind of like Scooby-Doo, split up and just kind of look around the place. Carlton heads towards the kitchen first, and Jessica kind of like chases after him, being like, I want to make sure this guy doesn't get in trouble. Marla and Lamar kind of just head off down to the party rooms, and Marla kind of forces Jason to follow them. And Charlie and John head back to the offices because Charlie wants to find Henry's office and see if there's any answers she can get there. That's kind of why she's here. And John's like supporting her in that, so he's there too. And Charlie knows exactly where Henry's office is. She goes there, the door's open, she heads in, and the place looks like it's been ransacked. Now, it looks like it hasn't been touched in 10 years, but the place has clearly been rifled through. There's papers all over the floor, drawers are left open, things are kind of like falling on the ground. It looks like somebody kind of ransacked the place and then left. And she's kind of a little bit shook by like, who the heck did this? And they both decide to kind of look through all the paperwork and see if there's anything they can find. They don't find too much, but eventually John does find like a folder that contains a whole bunch of like photos. And he's like, maybe we should take a look at this. Maybe there's something here. So they flip through them, and at first it kind of just looks like it's a bunch of random photos of an old building. And then Charlie realizes that these are actually crime scene photos. And she looks through them, and she's seeing things that she kind of remembers, though not all that much. She sees a shot of a building exterior where there's a door that's kind of been left open and a large window next to it. She sees another shot of some tire tracks left in an alleyway, another picture of the large open-topped prize box that she's seen in her dreams, and she kind of realizes this and tells John, being like, hey, I've seen this show up in like nightmares before. That wasn't just a nightmare, that was a memory. I remember this now. And then the last picture she looks at is kind of a strange one. It's a shot of just a bunch of junk in an alleyway, and amongst the junk is this strange looking prop or suit of some kind. It's kind of gangly looking with strangely long limbs and some random white stripes across it, but it's kind of hard to tell exactly what she's looking at. And all of this, she kind of then pieces together that crime scene photos, these kind of repressed memories she's having that are coming back as dreams and nightmares, she now remembers what this event is. This event isn't just some random thing from her memory. This was the last day that she saw Sammy. And the weight of that kind of takes over her, and she kind of begins to break down a bit, just remembering everything that's happened and just sort of the weight of her past coming back and finally kind of breaking through, and she starts to just cry. And John heads over and gives her a big hug, and she doesn't push him away. She just allows it, and the two just stand there for a while, and they're just kind of standing in this room, in this embrace. And then we kind of cut over to Marla and Lamar and Jason, and they're walking through the party rooms, and they're kind of looking around. They're not really sure what they're looking for, but Jason takes this time to sneak off. He has his own little flashlight, and he kind of takes this time to sneak off from Marla so that he can do his own thing. And he tries to turn on one of the arcades, and it doesn't work. There's no power to the building. He tries to fiddle with some more, and nothing happens. He's like, dang it, this sucks. Nothing's happening here. But he turns and he notices a big wall with a bunch of like kid-drawn pictures on there. And he walks over and he's looking at all of them. But one picture stands out to him. There's a picture of 5 kids standing there holding hands, all smiling, with a yellow rabbit standing behind them, smiling as well, with his arms out, sort of being like, hey, we got the big group here. And this picture, something about it is calling him to this picture. He can't explain it, but there's sort of a pull, a draw that's bringing him here. And he takes the picture off the wall and decides that he's going to take it with him. So he folds it up and puts it in his pocket and quickly heads back out and catches up with Marla and Lamar to act like nothing happened. And he finds them standing outside of a big curtain stage, and there's a big sign next to this stage that says, "Out of order." And Marla and Lamar kind of turn to each other and are like, do you really think that he's still in there? And right as they say that, they hear this huge, like, echoing crash throughout the entire building. Like, it's a, like, deafening crash through the entire building. And they all run back out to the main room. They see Charlie and John run back to the main room. And they see Carlton kind of, like, somber out of the kitchen area. And Jessica's kind of, like, holding him by the back of his shirt. And she explains that he thought it would be a good idea to try to climb the equipment, and he tipped over a fridge while he was trying to do that. So he looks a bit ashamed, and she's like, come on, you know better. But they all realize that noise probably would draw on the guard. He's probably already on alert from how much noise they've already made. That's surely going to bring him over here. So they're like, all right, we got to get the heck out of here. He's probably on his way. Let's get going. So they all start running out of there. John grabs his tools and puts the door kind of leaning back up in the doorway-ish, enough to cover it so it doesn't look too obvious, but like he can't put the door back on. So this is kind of covering it a little bit. And they all just start running out of there, and as they're leaving, they see the guard behind them, like chasing them, and they're just getting the heck out of there. They're all running. John quickly jumps in his car. He just throws the tools in his car, jumps in, and like drives out of there. Everybody else does that. Charlie gets in her car, and Jessica just opens the door and jumps in and was like, get the heck out of here. And they all quickly drive off, and they see the guard run into the parking lot, and they get the heck out of there. And Charlie and Jessica turn to each other, and they're kind of laughing. Like, that was a crazy experience. We haven't really had to run away from anybody in like a long time, like unless it was like tag back in the day. We haven't had to do that in a while, so they all just think it's kind of funny. And they all drive off, and Charlie and Jessica drive back to the motel, since they're at the same motel. They get out, they're like, all right, you know, good night, have a good night, whatever. They leave, and Charlie gets back to her room, but she just can't sleep. There's just been too much that happened, and the day's just been super stressful and super whatever. She just can't get any sleep. She's just too haunted by everything. She just can't fall asleep. So now it's morning, and Charlie didn't get like any sleep. She couldn't fall asleep. And so she kind of just gets ready for the day and shuffles over to Jessica's room, knocks on the door, is like, hey, can I just come in and talk to you? And Jessica's like, sure, why not? You know, it's like it's a little bit early, but you can come in here. And so Charlie heads in, and she just starts talking to Jessica about everything that's happened the past few days, you know, going back to the old house, meeting up with all the friends, thinking about what happened that day. And she also talks about things that aren't like common knowledge. She starts talking about how Henry disappeared as well, and how that's affected her, how she's moved. And she also talks about Fredbear's and the restaurant before. Now, she doesn't bring up Sammy or any of that kind of stuff, but she talks about how there was a restaurant before Freddy's, and how her dad used to run that. And she just kind of goes over all this information, being like, I'm really overwhelmed, I'm really stressed out, and while talking and hanging out with John has been very helpful. sometimes you just gotta talk to somebody else. So I just needed somebody else to talk to about this. I just needed someone else to know what I'm going through right now. And Jessica's like super supportive. She's like, absolutely, you know, that makes a ton of sense. I'm very happy that you came to talk to me, that you feel like you trust me enough to talk to me. Like she's happy there, but she's like, I get it, kind of comforts Charlie, whatever. And the two kind of just continue to talk for a bit, and then they hear some banging on their door, and they're like, oh great. And Jessica goes and opens the door, and it's Marla, and she's like, hey girls, how's it going? Right? I don't know how people talk to each other, but she's like, hey, how's it going? And she starts talking, and she's like, Lamar thought it would be a fun idea to take the rest of the boys out for like just kind of hanging around the town, having some fun, doing some boy things. And I thought it'd be fun to have a girls' day out in the town. And Jessica's like super on board. She's like, we can go shopping, we can do this, blah 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 blah. And Charlie's like, I don't want to do that, but I don't really have a choice because I can't really go anywhere else. So she kind of gets dragged along, and they all kind of just do their thing. Nothing really important happens here. They all just kind of hang out and spend some time in the town. And eventually it gets later in the day, and the two groups meet at the diner to grab some dinner, and they're just kind of talking about what they want to do next. They want to go back to Freddy's because they made a ton of noise. The guard's probably waiting there, so maybe they shouldn't, but also maybe they should because their time there kind of got cut short by Carlton because he made so much noise. And they're like, all right, well, we'll go back, but we'll just be extra careful going back. So they all finish up dinner, they head out, they go to Freddy's, and they start walking down the hallway, and they turn the corner to the room where the door to Freddy's is, and they see a security guard standing there, arms crossed, leaning up against the wall, being like, oh, I knew you guys would come back, caught ya. And he's like, what the heck are you guys doing out here anyway, right? Like, it's just an abandoned mall. What the heck are you guys doing here? And they're like, oh, well, we're not doing anything bad. And he's like, yeah, that's what they would all say, you know. What other reason would you have for being in an abandoned mall? And they're like, we're kind of just exploring, looking around, whatever. And he's like, okay, I know what you guys are doing here. You're sneaking into Freddy's. And they're like, oh, you know about Freddy's? And he's like, well, duh, I work here. You know, like, of course I know about Freddy's. I'm the one that's guarding this place. You think I haven't found that already? I've walked around this place top to bottom 10,000 times. I know about Freddy's. And he's like, I'm just surprised you guys actually managed to get in there. And they're like, oh, well, you could come with us. Maybe get off our backs and come with us, and you can explore Freddy's. And he's like, oh, sure, why not? It's been a long time since I've been at Freddy's. Ever since they closed the place. It'll be like good old times for me to go back in there. So they all head in, and he's kind of like looking around, and at first he looks a little bit confused, but then it seems like he kind of recognizes where he is, and he heads to one of the office rooms, and he kind of like flicks a few levers, opens a box, flicks another few little switches, and is able to just get the power back onto the building. And they're all kind of like, how the heck does he know how to do that? And then Dave kind of revealed his name. It's Dave. And he's like, he kind of reveals that, yeah, you know, he used to actually work at Freddy's back in the day. He used to work there. He was just some random technician at Freddy's, and he would help with, you know, some of the stage shows and all this kind of stuff. And he's just talking about his time and how he enjoyed it. And then they closed down the place, and he immediately lost his job, all this kind of stuff, and decided to take up the mall job to keep close to the old place, despite the fact that they sealed it off. So he's talking about how he does know his way around the place and whatever, and he's showing them all the fancy tricks in the office, and Jessica, Marla, and Lamar are super like thrilled and excited by this. They're like, oh, this is so cool. He's a little creepy, but this is cool. John and Charlie are like, yeah, we couldn't freaking care less about this. And Jason just kind of walks off, and Carlton follows him, but keeps his distance to look like he's not following him because they want to make sure that he's safe. So those two kind of go off, and John and Charlie are like, all right, let's get up to some shenanigans around here this time. We don't want some somber time around Freddy's. The power's on, the light's on. Let's have a bit of fun. So John's like, you know what we could do? We could do some hide and seek like classic times. And so he's like, all right, I'll start counting. You go hide. They play some hide and seek. They're kind of just hanging out, having fun, and everybody's like, oh, this is super exciting. Dave's getting the animatronics to dance on stage, and everybody's like, this is so cool. And they're all super thrilled. Jason's actually able to play an arcade machine because the power's on, and he's like, hey, this arcade works, and he's playing arcades, and everybody's having a grand old time. And eventually Dave's like, I'm gonna take another walk around the place. He shows them how to mess with all the stuff, and he's like, I'm just gonna walk around, take a good stroll, don't mind me, I'm just gonna do my thing. And he kind of walks off, and they're like, oh, this is so cool. And they get the camera systems on, and they're able to look at the cameras and all this kind of stuff. And then something starts to go wrong. The animatronics are continuing to move faster and faster, but nobody's using the controls. They're just kind of freaking out, and they're just starting to flail around exactly like how they were doing 10 years ago. And so the group's kind of like, oh shoot, well, something's going wrong. Where the heck did Dave go? We need him back because he knows what he's doing. Let's go try to find Dave. And they're looking through the cameras and they can't find him. And then the power starts to flicker. The lights are starting to flicker on and off. Things are starting to go a bit crazy, a bit wacky. Things are getting a bit quirky this night. And so they're like, what the heck's going on? It's getting nuts. And we cut over to Jason, who runs out of the arcade room because the arcade doesn't work anymore. And he's looking down the hallway trying to be like, hey, is there anybody here? And he looks down and he sees kind of like a figure standing at the end of the hall. And he's like, oh, maybe that's like, I don't know, John, maybe that's Carlton, maybe that's, you know, whoever. And he's looking, and he realizes that whoever this is extremely tall and has rabbit ears coming out of their head. This isn't a person, this is somebody in a suit, if not one of the animatronics. And he's like, that looks a lot like Bonnie. And he kind of gets confused, and he's just kind of like staring. And then the figure walks off into one of the other hallways. And Jason, well, being a kid, realizes that this is a very creepy situation. So he makes his way back to the office with Marla, and Marla's like, oh, well, where the heck were you? And she's getting on him because that's all she ever does. She just gets on Jason for being whatever. And they get into like some big, huge argument about, oh, well, all she does is just boss him around, and she's not his mom. And then she's like, she says something super hurtful to him, and he's like, you know what, screw this, I'm running off. I shouldn't have even come back over here. I shouldn't have even come here with you. I don't like you at all, lady. And so he runs off, and she's all like, oh, fine, whatever, you do your thing. And so he runs off, and he runs back to one of the hallways, and he's kind of just standing there, and he's like, he's not crying, but he's upset, and he's like, oh, you know, this sucks, and I should have stayed home, but home is also not great. And he's kind of just talking to himself. And then he's standing in front of one of the doorways. Boom, all of a sudden these hands just come around him and drag him into the doorway, and he's gone. We cut back over to Charlie and John, and they're also kind of like, well, we can't really play hide and seek when the place is acting like this. So they head back to the main group, and they're like, what the heck's going on here? We need to figure out what's going on. And they look over to the stage, and they see that while the other two animatronics, Chica and Bonnie, are freaking out, Freddy is just gone. He's just not on the stage. And they're like, where the heck did Freddy go? Did he like fall over? It's kind of hard to tell. It's like the lights are flickering. Did he like break off and tip over? What the heck happened? They're not supposed to move because they're stuck to the stage. Where did Freddy go? So they're all kind of like super spooked by that. They're like, let's just get the heck out of here. Things are going nuts. We don't know where Dave is. Things are just going a bit wild, a bit quirky. Get the heck out of here. So they all quickly run out of the building, and they run back out to the main room area. And that's when Marla's like, where the heck is Jason? And she starts freaking out, like, we need to go back in there to find him now. And they're like, well, you see how wacky things are going on in there? We don't even know where the heck Freddy went. If the animatronics are able to like move around somehow, that would be a bit wild. We don't want to be in there with that. Let's just call the police. They'll come over here and investigate. We'll let them handle this because we're just a bunch of like just graduated high school kids. We don't know what the heck we're doing. Let's let some professionals handle this. It's too crazy in there for us to deal with. And Marla's kind of trying to resist, but they kind of drag her out there, and they're like, well, head to the police station. Carlton's like, I'll get my dad, and he'll know what to do. He'll believe me. We got this. It's fine. My dad is the best police chief in the world. We'll figure this out. And so they all get back in their cars, and they all drive off to the police station. They all drove up to the police station, and Marla basically just jumps out of her car and runs right on into the station. Carlton is like just shortly behind her, and then the rest of the group slowly make their way into the building. And they get inside and they see Marla and Carlton kind of just like rambling and talking super crazily to Chief Burke, who's standing there kind of just trying to take everything in. And he's also trying to calm Marla down a bit, being like, look, all right, I know it's a crazy stressful situation, calm down, breathe, tell me what happened, we gotta go over this. And so they all explain the situation, and they talk about they went into Freddy's, and next thing they knew, Jason was gone, things are going crazy, blah 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 blah. And Chief Burke's like, all right, first of all, you guys shouldn't have been there. There's a reason that it got sealed off. You guys shouldn't have been there. But since you were there, we can't really change anything now. We can't find Jason. All right, I'll make that our top priority. I'll have an officer go into the location to look for him there. Most likely, though, Jason left. We'll find them somewhere in the woods. I'll send out a bunch of people on patrol to go look for him. For right now, everybody just needs to calm down, though, because stressing and worrying isn't going to help anything. And he continues to talk, and he's like, all right, well, it seems like you guys have been through a lot. Why don't you stay at my place tonight? I'll drive you guys over there. I got plenty of space for all of you. I think it's the best thing for you guys to all stick together. So let's just drive over there and just see if you guys can calm down. Try to get a little bit of sleep. And then in the morning, we'll most likely have found him. Just try to take it easy tonight. I know it's crazy, but there's not much you guys are going to be able to do. So they all get back in their cars and they drive over there, and Chief Burke leads them to his house, and he's got like the super big fancy mansion because somehow he can afford that. And they all go in and they all sit down in his living room area, and he's like, all right, I'm not going to stay long because I'm going to go out there and I'm going to go help look for him. But just sort of, again, as a group, recap why on earth you guys are there. And so they kind of talk, and they're like, well, you know, we just wanted to see if it was still there, and then we found it, and then we went in, and we thought it was super cool, and we wanted to just see what we could do there because it's Freddy's. We all enjoyed Freddy's, and we just wanted to, you know, visit there again. And he's like, well, how the heck did you guys get in? And John does a little bit of like, you know, maybe we broke in, and why the heck did you guys break in? And they all talk, and then eventually somebody brings up that the security guard at the mall also went in with them during that night. And Chief Burke's kind of like, that's a little bit weird. Did anybody see where he went? Did he leave? And they're like, no, we don't really know what happened to him. His name was Dave. He kind of just disappeared, and then everything went crazy. Chief Burke's like, okay, you know, that's a little bit odd. I'll have to look into this, but for right now, just hang out. I'm gonna go back to the station. There's like food. I got food and drinks and stuff in the kitchen if you need anything. Just try to get some sleep. So he leaves again, and the rest of the group's kind of sitting there. Marla's just super stressing and worrying, and now she's blaming herself about Jason running off, and she's like, I shouldn't have been so rude, blah 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 blah. And the rest of the group is trying to be like, look, this isn't your fault, really. Like, you know, it kind of is, but it's not your fault. And they're trying to comfort her and being like, look, Jason's fine. He's a strong kid. He knows what he's doing. He'll be fine. You just gotta not worry. Try to get some sleep. He'll be here in the morning. Just calm down. So Jessica takes Marla out to one of the rooms to try to just, you know, calm her down a bit more. And the rest of the group is just sort of sitting in the area, and they're all talking, and they're trying to talk about things that aren't related to the events that happened that night. So they're just talking about, you know, oh, well, remember when we were kids and we would do this, and they're just sort of talking about that. And Lamar and Carlton do a little bit of the, oh, well, you know, John would always go over to Charlie's house, and they're kind of talking like that, and John and Charlie are kind of blushing a little bit. They're going, you know, whatever. And Lamar's like, yeah, I bet whenever John would go over, he'd try to kiss her. And John just looks over to Lamar and is like, dude, we were kids. That's gross. And they're kind of just talking and laughing, and they're trying to get their minds off of everything. And eventually it gets a little bit later. Everybody heads off the bed, and Charlie just fell asleep on the couch. And so John grabs a blanket, puts it over top of her, and sits next to her on the couch. And then he also falls asleep. We then go back to Jason, who finds himself waking up in a strange room. He can't really see everything that's in there. There's a faint light in the center of the room, and he can see a bunch of what looks like mascot parts, but he can't really get a good look because he's constrained. He can't move. He can only turn his head a little bit, and he's kind of looking around, but he can't move the rest of his body. And he kind of tries to, but then he feels a sharp pain in one of his arms, so he stops moving. And that's when he hears Dave being like, yeah, I wouldn't try moving around if I were you. And Dave reveals himself out of the shadows in one of the corners of the room. He doesn't have the rabbit mask on, but he's got the rest of the suit on, and he's like, yeah, that's a springlock suit. Don't you dare try to move around in there. If you move too much, they might go off, and most likely you will not survive. And so he does his whole explaining about the spring locks, and Jason's kind of like, how the heck do you know all this information, dude? Like, I thought you were just some random night guard. How the heck do you know this? And Dave's like, well, I know this because I experienced it. And he takes out the suit and he does this thing with like the arms out and he's got all the scars. And he's like, oh, you know, I got spring locked before too, but I was able to survive. And so he just talks about, he does his Dave thing where he talks about all the spring locks. And he's like, now remember, don't move. And he leaves the room to go do whatever else. And Jason looks around and he's trying to take in the rest of his surroundings still. And he sees in one of the corners of the room a yellow bear suit that's just sort of slumped there. And he's a little confused. He's like, so there's a yellow rabbit and a yellow bear? And he's like trying to just figure out what's going on. And then he turns to look back straight in front of him. And he gets a little bit startled. He doesn't jump back, but he gets a bit startled because there's another kid sitting in the middle of the room. A kid with short blonde hair just sort of sitting crisscross right in front of Jason. And Jason's kind of like, who the heck are you? Like, where the heck did you come from? There's another kid. You want to like maybe help me out of here? And the kid's like, oh, well, like, hi, who are you? My name is Michael Cassidy Brooks. I'd like to know who you are. And Jason's like, well, I'm Jason. Can you help me out? I need to get out of the suit. And Michael's like, oh, well, I can't exactly help you with that right now. He wanted you in the suit, and that's what we're going to do. It's a bit of a game. We're going to have a bit of fun. And so they talk back and forth a bit about, you know, oh, well, we're just trying to have some fun here, and we'd love it if you joined us for a lot more fun. Like, join the party, you know, we'd love to have you here. And Jason's like, well, I just need to get out of the suit. And they keep talking for a bit. We then cut to a police car pulling up to the mall and an officer getting out of the car. This is Officer Dunn, and he's tasked with going into the building and trying to find Jason. That's what he has to do. So he walks in, he's kind of grumbling to himself. He's like, oh, why the heck am I here? You know, I would rather be sleeping because it's the middle of the night, but I suppose looking for a kid is very important. So he's like, you know, I'll reassure myself with that. I'm doing something good here. So he walks in and he's looking around and he's like, oh, this place is actually a lot larger than it seems. Where the heck am I going to find a kid? So he's looking through some of the rooms, and eventually he goes out to the main party hall, and he looks at the stage, and the other two animatronics are no longer moving, but Freddy is still gone. And he's like, that's a bit weird. Freddy isn't here. So he's like looking around, and he's like, man, I remember this place. I used to come here as a kid. This place was super cool. It kind of sucks that it closed down. And then he hears a bit of a shuffling noise, and he looks over, and he doesn't see anything. But he looks back to the stage and everything seems to be normal, but didn't Chica used to have a cupcake on the plate? I thought I could have sworn that there was one there. Oh, well, maybe I'm just imagining things. So he continues and walks off, and he turns down a hallway to some of the party rooms. And as he turns his flashlight into the hallway, and he sees the glimpse of a figure walking into one of the party rooms. And he kind of like catches himself. He's like, did I actually see that? Was there something there? Somebody's here moving around. So he goes over and he looks into the party room where the figure went, and he doesn't see anything. He's looking and he just can't seem to find anything. And he turns around and he sees another figure who is peeking around the corner. Quickly hide. Now he's getting super spooked. What the heck's happening here? Are there people messing with me here? What the heck's going on? So he decides to go back out to the main party room, where he looks back at the stage and it's completely empty. There's nobody on stage anymore. And now he is stressing. So he turns to go back out. He's just going to leave. He's like, you know, I'm not dealing with this crap. He turns to leave and he goes down the hallway. But as he pushes open the double doors and he looks down the hallway, he sees a blue animatronic standing at the end of the hallway, just staring at him. And then it starts moving closer, and it starts not running, but fastly like walking towards him. And so Dunn yells out a bit of a yell, and he turns and he leaves, and he quickly runs, and he runs down the party rooms again, because he's like, I'm just gonna hide in the party rooms. And as he turns the corner, he basically just runs into a yellow chicken animatronic, and he falls back, and he's like, oh, now Chica's here, and he runs off, and he's like, I gotta find a place to freaking hide. So he finds the kitchen, and he just sort of jumps into the kitchen. He's like, I gotta hide in here. And he jumps in, and he's like, oh man, I gotta recollect myself. He looks around, he doesn't see anybody in there. I gotta collect myself. And then the lights in the kitchen go out. The power is now out in the kitchen. He's like, oh great, you know, now I can't really even see anything. And that's when he hears the music, the dun 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 dun, and he hears the music, and he turns around, and he's face to face with Freddy. We then go back to Charlie and John and the rest of the group at Chief Burke's house. Charlie wakes up, and she's kind of like, oh, you know, that was a bit of a you know, like the part where he's kind of sleep rough, and you're like, oh yeah, this is pretty bad. And she wakes up, and she was kind of leaning on John, and John also wakes up, and they both realize that the rest of the friend group is just standing over them, kind of smiling, smirking, being like, ooh, you know, oh, they're sleeping, oh, that's so cute, oh, whatever. And John's kind of blushing, and Charlie is like, dude, they're just messing with us, just stop worrying about it. And so they all get up, and Charlie is like, hey, any word about, you know, from Burke or anything like that? And they all kind of look at each other, you know, the smiles kind of fade, and they're like, we haven't really heard anything at all. Burke assures us that, you know, he's still looking, but we haven't really, you know, gotten any good news. There hasn't been anything like that. So they're all deciding, what are we going to do? We need to figure out a plan. Are we going to go back? Should we go behind Chief Burke's back and go to Freddy's to figure out what happened to Jason? Or what are we going to do? And they decide that they're going to go back, and they're going to go back now. They're not going to waste any time. They're not going to go back later. They're just going to go back now. So they all decide to go back, and they're like, should we call Burke about, like, Chief Burke about this? Or what should we do? Nah, we probably shouldn't get him involved. He's going to tell us not to go. So they decide they're just going to go behind his back and just go to the restaurant. So they all drive out there, and they're like, we're going to find Jason. And they get there, and they see 2 police cars. So they get out, and they're like, all right, we're gonna have to be careful trying to get back into the restaurant. So they all head in, and they head over to where the door is, and they turn the corner into the room, and they see Chief Burke standing there, and he's not really waiting for them. He gets kind of caught off guard. He's like, well, what are you kids doing here? And they're like, well, what the heck are you doing here? And Chief Burke's like, I haven't heard anything from my officer. I sent in Officer Dunn. He's like one of my most trusted police officers. I sent him in here, and I haven't heard anything back. He went in hours ago, and I haven't heard anything from him. So I came to investigate, and the door you guys are talking about, it's sealed up again. And they're like, what the heck? So they look over to the door, and now it's even more sealed up. It's like welded to the frame. And they're like, well, great, we're not going to get this open. And now they need to come up with a new plan. So the group stands there, and they're trying to figure out if there's another way to get into the restaurant, and they all kind of turn to Charlie, being like, do you know another way in? Your dad built the place. You have to know some other way to get into the building. And she kind of stops, and she thinks for a minute, and she's like, well, the staff-only door here is closed. You know, the front entrance seems like it's sealed off, and the only other ways to get in and out of the building would be the windows, or, and she stops for a second, and then out loud she's like, the skylight. And they all kind of look at her like super confused, like, what are you talking about? The skylight? What? And she's like, yeah, my dad's office had a skylight that he would open during like super hot days in the summer, because the building would steam up, and he'd always open it and all this kind of stuff. And she's like, if we can get to the skylight, we can get into my dad's office and into the building. And they all keep staring at her like, all right, good idea. How are we going to get to the roof? Is there even a way to get to the roof of Freddy's? And they all kind of like look up at the ceiling, like all in sync. They all look up at the ceiling, and they realize that it hadn't been finished off yet. So there's a whole bunch of exposed wiring, piping, all the like support beams and all this kind of stuff. The ceiling is exposed. So they're all like looking up, and they're like, all right, well, how are we gonna, you know, get up there? All right, so it looks like there might be a space for us to crawl up there. How are we gonna get up there? And they look around the room, and there's a whole bunch of like boxes, shelves, all this kind of stuff. So they make a makeshift staircase ladder up to the ceiling, and they all climb up there, and they look back down, and they're like, Chief Burke, are you coming with us? Are you gonna come with us? And he's like, no, I got a team coming down here that's gonna get this door open. You guys go in. I trust you guys are gonna know what to do. Go in there, see if you can find him. I'm gonna wait for the team to get this door open. That way we have an easier way to get in and out, and we can go from there. So they're like, all right, sounds good. So they all go in, they find the skylight, they all climb in, and now they're back in the building. And they're like, all right, we need a game plan here. We need to figure something out that's gonna be better than whatever the heck happened last time. So they decide that the best option would be to split up into 2 groups. Marlo, Lamar, and Jessica are going to go to the office because Dave showed them how to use the systems, how to use the cameras, all this kind of stuff. So they'll know what to do there. Carlton, Charlie, and John are going to actually go out and look for Jason. And they're going to try to kind of like look around, see if they can figure out what's happening. So they all go to the office to grab walkie-talkies first. They split them up, they get them on the same channel, and then the teams split. So now we follow Charlie, John, and Carlton as they're going around, and they're like, all right, well, if we were Jason, where would we be? And they think, all right, well, he liked the arcades, let's check there first. So they make their way into the main party room, and they look over to the stage, and they see that while Freddy is back on stage, Chica's gone. Bonnie's still there too, but Chica is gone. She's not on stage. And they're like, all right, well, things are getting a little wacky now. Now Chica's gone? Where the heck did she go? So they're like, all right, we got to be on alert. Something fishy's going on here. Let's keep our eyes open in case of anything crazy happening. So they walk over and they start looking through the party rooms. They're looking in. They're like, Jason, are you here? They're talking. They're looking, and they can't seem to find him anywhere. And they call up Jessica on the walkie-talkie. They're like, hey, are you guys seeing anything on the cameras? No, we're not seeing anything. We can't find him. And they're like, well, he's got to be around here somewhere. So they keep looking, and eventually they get to the little side party room where Foxy is, and there's the big curtain with the out of order sign. And they're like, well, do you think maybe he's hiding in the curtain area? And Charlie kind of peels the curtain back a little bit, and as she does so, she feels John's hand on her shoulder pull her back quick, and she, right in front of her face, sees a arm with a hook just swing and tear the curtain open. And she kind of falls back to the ground, and she looks up, and Foxy then walks out of what remains of the curtain that he just ripped up and steps off the stage and is just sort of hovering in front of them with the hook kind of leaning out towards them, and he's just staring them down. And they're like, what in tar nation is happening here? Like, the animatronics can move around and they're attacking us? Like, they're completely caught off guard. They're terrified. And they get up to turn and leave, and they look down the hallway, and they see flickering lights now from the main party room, and they see the silhouette of Bonnie standing at the end of the hallway. And now they're like super screwed. They're like, the animatronics are apparently active and they're attacking us for some reason. Is this what happened to Jason? What the heck's going on here? And they turn back to Foxy, and he's starting to charge at them now. He's running at them. So they all dive out of the way, and he kind of like slips and slides into the wall. And they're like, it's like a Scooby-Doo scene. They all have to run the heck out of there. So they're all split up. Carlton runs back towards one of the other party rooms. John and Charlie kind of stumble to their feet and run towards where Bonnie is. And Bonnie starts walking towards them. And they're getting kind of cornered. Fox is coming in from the back. Bonnie's coming in from the front. And they decide that they're just going to kind of split and go and hide in some of the party rooms. So they split, and we follow Charlie as she runs into one of the party rooms and is able to hide behind one of the arcade machines. And she hears Foxy run into the room, and she can tell that he's looking around. She can hear the little like servers and motors moving around, like looking for her. And he walks up to one of the arcade machines and just like tears it off the wall and like throws it to the ground and like basically just destroys the arcade machine. And he goes to the next one and he does the same thing. And she's like, oh, he's gonna come kill me, isn't he? So she's just hiding. She's like, all right, I gotta either make a break for it or I gotta do something. So Foxy walks up to where her machine is, and she decides that she's just gonna tip it over on him. So she kicks the machine over, like puts her back up against the wall and kicks the machine over, and it topples over on top of Foxy, and he's now kind of pinned underneath there. She gets up and she runs back out to the main room. And then she runs just right into Bonnie. He's standing in the doorway, and he grabs her, and he kind of like lifts her up off the ground, and he's keeping her up in the air, and she's struggling to try to get out, but she can't. And then all of a sudden, Bonnie just goes like flying forward, lets go of her. She like topples to the ground, and Bonnie like falls over on the ground, and she's like, what the heck happened? And she sees John, who did like a jump double kick and knocked him over. And they both like get up to their feet, and they look over and they see Foxy tips the arcade off of him, and he's getting back up. Bonnie's trying to get back up, and they're like, all right, we gotta get Carlton, and we gotta get the heck out of here. So they run back out to the hallway. Carlton's already there, and he's like, did you guys do it? Did you guys, defeat the animatronics? And they're like, well, we think we did, but we got to get back to the office. We got to get back to the others because it's clearly not safe out here. So they all run back out to the party room, and they look over to the stage, and there's nobody on stage now. Everybody's gone. They're like, okay, well, this is just a nightmare now. So they run back to the main service, like staff only hallway. And that's when Charlie gets the idea of there's one room that they didn't really stop and check to see if Jason was there. The parts and service room, which is in this staff hallway. So she's like, wait, guys, we have to check the parts and service room. That's like the one room that we didn't check. Let's go there. So they all go back to the parts and service room. They open the door and they see Jason in there in the spring lock suit. And he's kind of just staring forward, and he was talking, and then he turns and looks over at them, and he's like, oh, thank goodness, you guys are here. Can you get me out of this thing? And so Charlie runs over. She does her whole, like, I know how spring locks work because my dad made these, and she gets him out of there and does the whole thing of, like, she peels the suit off and then throws the suit and it snaps shut, and he's safe. And they're like, oh my word, Marlo's gonna be so happy that you're okay. And he's like, is Marlo really gonna be happy that I'm okay? She doesn't really seem to like me. And they're like, you should have seen her. She was just so distraught about you not being here. She does actually care about you. She's just, it's not easy for her either. And they have a little bit of a talk, and Jason finally understands that she's just trying to be an okay sister. And they get up to turn to leave, and that's when they hear somebody walking down the hallway, and they're like, shoot, is this like one of our friends? Is this somebody else? So they all kind of hide quickly to, avoid having whoever it is see them. And they hear the door open, and they see Dave walk into the room, and he kind of gets taken aback, like, what the heck happened here? Like, I heard the spring locks go off. Where the heck is the body? Like, somebody's supposed to be dead here, and nobody's dead. And that's when Charlie whack over the back of the head with something that she just found, like a piece of pipe or something, right over the back of the head. And Dave just like plunked down on the floor, out cold. And they're like, oh shoot, maybe I hit him too hard. But they're like, all right, let's just get the heck out of here. So they all run out of the room, and they all go back to the office. And Marla's just over ecstatic that Jason's okay. They're like, oh, thank goodness, this was just like she's just so happy to see him. She's like, oh, I'm just so happy you're okay. And then they make it up a bit. They're like, oh, big hug. Oh, it's okay. I forgive you. Whatever. And now they're like, all right, well, we got Jason back. So we accomplished mission A. Now we got to figure out how to get out of here. So they all kind of talk for a minute, and that's when they kind of realize, like, hey, we incapacitated Dave. Maybe he knows another way to get out of here, right? Like, he seems to know his way around the location. Maybe he knows how to get out of here. So John, Charlie, and Carlton are like, all right, fine. We'll make our way back out there. You guys stay on the cameras. We'll go back to the parts and service room, and we'll see if we can get any information out of him. So they leave, and breaking the immersion for a second here, this next scene is like the big scene of the story. So I thought it would be a fun idea to kind of zoom in on this section and like focus in on this specific scene. So we're going to be a little bit more in depth here with a little bit of voice acting. So stay tuned for that. Hope you guys are excited. This scene is going to be a focused in scene. John, Charlie, and Carlton slowly made their way to the storage room, being guided by Jessica over the walkie-talkie. Once they got to the door, Charlie slowly began to open it, being sure not to make any noise. As she peered into the room, she saw that Dave was still lying motionless on the ground. She gasped, backing away from the door. John went in front of her and began to slowly open the door just wide enough for them to go through. Carlton entered first, followed by Charlie, and then John, who made sure to close the door behind him, again not making any noise. Charlie leaned over to John.
I killed him.
John looked down at Dave and slowly approached him. He knelt to the ground and put 2 fingers up to Dave's neck.
You didn't kill him. I've got a heartbeat.
Carlton then approached both of them.
We'll need to find something to restrain him with. Let's see if there's something around here we can use.
Carlton and Charlie began looking around the room, and John moved Dave up against the wall, sitting him upright. They eventually found some old wiring in a box against one of the walls, but as they approached the box, Charlie saw Officer Dunn's body stuffed in an old Freddy suit.
That's Dunn, the officer who went looking for Jason.
Carlton walked over, giving her a worrying look, then quickly shook it, grabbed the wires, and they both made their way back to Dave. They don't have time to deal with this right now. They grabbed the wires, tied up Dave, and made sure that he couldn't get out. Charlie backed away.
That should do it. Now we just have to wake him up.
John tried to give Dave a few slaps in the face, but Dave still didn't move.
We'll need to find some water to splash.
Carlton ran up and kicked Dave right in the side, jolting him awake. Charlie leaned over to Carlton.
Nice job.
Dave slowly began to move and stretch as he tried to settle himself. He opened his eyes and took his time looking across the three of them. He stopped on Charlie and locked eyes with her. She quickly turned away from him. That's when John took a step closer.
Dave, what exactly is going on here?
Dave slowly turned to John, but did not speak. He just stared. Carlton spoke up.
Are we sure he's okay enough to talk to us?
Dave moved his gaze, but not to Carlton, but to a table of mascot parts in the back of the room. Charlie looked over and saw a yellow rabbit mask sitting on the table. She walked over, slowly approaching it as if the head itself was going to jump at her. She picked it up and slowly inspected each element of it, looking around and inside the helmet. She noticed a series of spring locks inside and a release switch at the back of the head. She brought the mask over to Dave.
Is this what you wanted?
Dave moved his gaze to her, just staring blankly. Charlie bent down and put the head over Dave's face, blocking out most of his features, though his cold eyes could still be seen peering through. John leaned closer.
Now will you talk? How do we get out of here?
Dave began to shift, sitting more upright and holding himself in a more confident pose. His eyes focused in on John.
Leave? There is no leaving, at least not for you.
Dave spoke with a smooth and swift tone, a sharp change from his previous slow and rambling talking from before. Carlton spoke up again.
What do you mean there's no leaving? You should know of another way out.
Dave shifted his focus to Carlton.
Oh yes, there are many more ways out of this place, but you won't be using them. The children will make sure of that.
John, Charlie, and Carlton all turned to each other. Charlie looked back at Dave.
The children? You mean the kids you took?
Dave shot his head up.
Right you are. The kids don't like it when people try to ruin their fun.
Carlton shoved Dave against the wall.
What fun? What did you do to the kids? What did you do to Michael?
Carlton began to raise his voice in response to Dave. Charlie stopped to think for a minute. Stopping the kids from having their fun. There haven't been any kids here, only the...
You killed them and hid the bodies in the suits.
John and Carlton turned to Charlie with surprise, that soon turned towards disgust with Dave. Dave laughed a little.
Half right. Guess that makes you a little smarter than your dad. He wasn't the brightest guy.
Dave's gaze was solely set on Charlie, and his eyes were beginning to fill with a smug confidence that they hadn't shown before. Charlie took a step back from the comment, then focused in on Dave.
You don't get to talk about my father.
Dave tilted his head.
No, I was his business partner, his co-worker, his friend. I believe that gives me every right to talk about him in any way I please.
Dave was beginning to change, sounding more angry and less confident in what he was saying, though Charlie was too unfocused to notice.
Friend? You haunted every place my dad tried to make. You kidnapped my brother. You ruined our entire family.
Dave's eyes flared with pure rage.
Henry destroyed my life, my family. Your dad's faulty suits made sure of that. I lost, so he lost. It's only fair.
Dave began to shift into a more confident anger, and Charlie could tell. Now she was the one filled with pure rage. She swung her fist directly into the rabbit's mask and sent him falling to the floor. John leaned over to Charlie.
Nice hit.
John's voice brought Charlie back down to the here and now.
Yeah. Did hurt, though.
Dave began to sit back upright and focus back on Charlie. Before he could say anything else, John took his turn again with Dave.
You said something about the kids stopping us from leaving. Care to elaborate on that?
Dave turned away from Charlie and focused back on John. He stared for a moment, then spoke.
The kids just want their fun, and you adults are ruining that for them. They won't let you leave alive.
Carlton was taken aback.
They'll kill us, but not you. You're the one who killed them.
Dave sighed a little.
They don't remember. The dead oft forget. They don't remember me, and therefore won't harm me when I walk out of here. Over your corpses.
Carlton responded.
You're an adult too. Why wouldn't they kill you?
Dave shifted again.
You see, when I have this, I become one of them. They see me as a friend.
John stepped closer to Dave.
Stop stalling. Tell us how to get out of here.
Or what? You're not going to do anything. Either you leave me here, or the children make their way into the room. I've got all night.
Dave just coldly stared at John. That's when Charlie leaned over.
It's no use, John. We need to get back to the others and come up with a plan.
John and Carlton agreed, and Charlie bent down closer to Dave.
I guess we'll see how safe you are now.
She removed the rabbit mask and tossed it away from Dave. The three made their way to the door. So they go back out to the hallway and they kind of look around, making sure that there's like nobody else out here. And they start to try to make their way back to the office, but that's when the power to the building just shuts off. All the power, not just the lights, like all the power in the building shuts off. And they're like, oh, shoot. And so they did have flashlights, so they get the flashlights out and they're kind of looking around and they're like, this isn't an ideal situation, right? The power's out now. What the heck's going on? And that's when they hear it from behind them. The hor, 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 hor. And they slowly turn around and they see some flickering lights and they see the face of Freddy just standing at the end of the hallway. And they're kind of just frozen. They're like, what in the good gracious is going on here? Like, he's glowing and he's singing. What are we gonna do? We gotta get the heck out of here. And they're like, if we can make it back to the office, we can maybe close the door and keep Freddy from, coming in and attacking us. So they start to slowly back up, but Freddy just slowly walks forward, still singing his song, and he's just following them at the same pace. If they move faster, he moves faster. He's just keeping in constant motion with them. And then the singing stops and the light goes out. And they still have the flashlights trained on him, and he's just standing there now, staring at them. And Charlie kind of leans over to John and is like, we gotta get the heck out of here. Turn and run towards any room that you can find. We gotta go. So the three just turn and run and they start sprinting down the hallway, and then they hear Freddy picking up the pace and he's starting to chase them now. And Carlton and John sort of dive in the one room. Charlie dives back into the office with the others, and they all slam the doors closed, and they hear pounding on the office door now. Freddy's there and he's banging on the office door trying to break in, and there's not really a very strong lock to the door, so they're kind of have to barricade it and hold themselves up against the door, and he is just really trying to force his way in there. And he's pounding on the door, and they're like, crap, he's gonna get in here. The door's slowly opening, and then they hear some sparks and a huge thud to the ground. And they're like, what the heck is that? And the pounding on the door stopped. And they open the door, and they kind of like, they have the flashlights out there, and they look over, and they're like, is everything okay? Like, what happened? And they see Freddy in like the death pose on the ground. He's just like out cold, and they look up, and they see that the doorway has been unsealed, and there's Chief Burke with a couple other police officers in there. He just used the taser on Freddy and knocked him out, and like the cavalry's arrived. They can get the heck out of here. Everybody's super excited. They're like, yay! They all walk in the hallway. John and Carlton walk out in the hallway as well. They look down to make sure that there's not any of the other animatronics, you know, standing down there. And they're like, all right, we're safe now. We have a way out. We have Jason. Everything, like, mission accomplished here. You know, everything is great. And they're going to leave, and Charlie walks over to John, and they're like, oh, you know, it's so great. We won the day, you know, whatever. And they turn to Chief Burke, and they're like, you know, Dave's in that room. He's all tied up. You just got to deal with him. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Let's get out of here. And they all turn to leave, and then Chief Burke, they see him raise his gun and kind of point it towards where Charlie is, and Charlie is like, what the heck? And that's when two huge animatronic hands like kind of rope around her and pull her back, and she hears, yeah, you're not going anywhere. You're all staying here. And it's Dave. He's back in the Spring Bonnie costume, holding her hostage, and everybody's turning and looking at them. And Burke with the other police officers all have their guns raised, and they're like, put her down or we're gonna shoot you, right? Like, we're gonna do this. And he's like, no, I'm not, you know, like, I'm not going anywhere. You know, you try to shoot me, I'll kill her. I can snap her neck instantly. I'm gonna kill her if you try to shoot me. You're all gonna stay here. Officers, you're gonna leave. Do as I say. And so the police, you know, it's a hostage situation. You kind of got to work with the people holding the hostages. So they're like, all right, put the guns down. We're going to slowly back up. We got to do what he says, because otherwise he's going to kill her. And he's like, yep, you do that. Everybody leave. And John kind of looks at Charlie like worried and scared. And she's a little bit worried at first. And then she remembers what she saw in the helmet. And she kind of gives John a little bit of like a, I know what I'm doing look. And John's worry kind of fades away. And she looks back, like kind of tries to look over her shoulder towards Dave, and reaches her arm back underneath his helmet, and Dave's like, what the heck are you doing? And she flips the spring lock switch and spring locks the suit. And so he like freaks out. He lets go of her, and he's like, oh, you know, he's getting spring locked, and she jumps out of there. And then Burke pulls out the gun again and shoots Dave a couple times. And so he's getting shot and spring locked, and he falls over to the floor, and he's freaking out. And they're like, everybody, we're dipping the heck out of here. We gotta go. So they all run out of there. And as they're running out, Charlie turns around, and she sees Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy standing over top of Dave getting spring locked. And they see Freddy getting up. And they're all just sort of looking at the group as they leave. And they're like, we gotta get the heck out of there. So they all run. Chief Burke puts the door back up against the frame. And he's like, we're getting the heck out of here. Let's go. Everybody out. We're leaving. We're not dealing with this anymore. So they all run out of there, and they run all back out to the parking lot, and everybody's like recuperating. Oh man, that was crazy. That was nuts. That was a wild scenario. But we somehow we did it. You know, somehow we defeated Afton. Woohoo, yippee. We won the day. Dave got spring locked, and who knows what's going to happen with the rest of the animatronics in the location. Burke's like, we probably should have just tore that place down. I think that's what we're going to do now. We killed that guy. He's dead. Let's just tear the place down, and we'll make sure that none of this ever happens again. And so we gotta get to the end of the story here. It's like not much happens. You know, everybody's like, oh, you know, it's time to go. We saved the day. This is too much adventure for 1 week. Man, we sure did spend 5 nights at Freddy's. Hooey. It was quite the adventure. And they're all gonna go their separate ways, because it's, you know, it's the end of the story. Jessica, Marla, all of them go back out to their different places. Jessica's driving up to Cedar City to go to college, and Charlie's like, you know, I think that I'll do that too. So she's gonna end up going to college in Cedar City as well. John's staying in Hurricane, and she's like, hey, it's only about a 40-minute drive. We can keep in touch more. And so the story ends off on like a, hey, you know, we can keep in touch. We'll stay friends, and if this ever, you know, let's hope this never happens again. It would be a real shame if something managed to happen in a year and everything kind of got twisted around and there was a bunch of ones that got twisted around, you know, like, it would be a real shame if that happened. And then the story ends. Alright, well, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. There was a lot of work that went into this, and this was like a super big project. I mean, I had to add on an extra week to the schedule in order to get this video out. So there was a lot of work, a lot of effort, and I just really hope that you guys enjoyed it and that it turned out. And I do think that this video wouldn't have been as good if not for the help of some very special people. So I want to give a massive shout out to the Baldwin Birds, Solid Silver, and Luke for providing some voice lines for the video. The Baldwin Birds provided the voice for John, Solid Silver was our William Afton / Dave, and Luke provided the voice for Carlton. So I just want to give a big shout out to them. We're kind of putting like a team together. I feel like singing Iron Man. I'm like assembling the Avengers here. So we're putting together a team of people that are going to be a part of the discussion videos going forward. So expect them to be in a lot of at least discussion-esque videos and potentially even more in the future. So just a big shout out to them. And I also want to give a super special, one of a kind special thanks to my sister for providing the voice lines for Charlie. That's right, you know, another family member introduced into the channel. I needed somebody to provide voice lines for Charlie. I was gonna do that, but I'm not, I'm a guy. It's kind of hard for me to do that. I have a low voice. It's a little bit difficult. So I asked if my sister would be willing to, and she did. So just a special thanks to her, and just thought I'd bring that up. So as we kind of round off this video, usually I would talk about the topic poll and what you can go vote on. However, I'm making a bit of an executive decision here. Usually, like I said, there'd be a topic poll and I'd be like, go vote on this option or whatever. But for the first time since the start of me making discussion videos, I think, don't quote me on that, but I think this will be the first time without a topic poll. Or at least the next two videos won't be voted on by you guys because, well, not because you guys like vote on anything bad, because they're all my options, but I'm gonna be finishing off the novel trilogy. I just feel like if I put up the poll and like something else got voted on and we moved away from the novel trilogy, that I would just kind of get thrown off the groove, because I'm like super invested into this right now. Like, I am into FNAF books and FNAF writing and all this kind of stuff. I'm writing my own book, so I'm like super invested into this, and I really just want to finish telling my novel trilogy rewritten the series thing, whatever. So executive decision, the next discussion video is going to be the Twisted Ones rewritten, followed up by the Fourth Closet rewritten. So just expect that to be the next two. No topic polls for those. And then following the Fourth Closet rewritten, we'll be back to the regular schedule. You guys can vote on what's going to come next, but I just really want to tell this story, so we're going to stay in this zone and just see it through to the end. First time in a long time, so we're gonna be doing that. And that's really about it. We're going to be rounding off the video here. So we'll do what we always do. We'll do our shameless plugs. Go check them out. The Instagram and the channel membership are down below, so feel free to check out both of those. The Instagram, I on occasion post some fun random content, usually just memes. It's just a pretty fun place I've had since the start of the channel, so feel free to check that out if you want to. And channel memberships, you get some fun perks. For example, every Sunday I have been releasing a lost tapes, quote unquote, video, which is an old Twitch live stream from before I started YouTube that pretty much nobody has ever seen. So I'm posting it up for people who want to see it as members only content. So if you want to become a member and see some quite awkward and really bad quality mic Ryan before I started the channel, then you can become a member and check that out. So that's one of the perks you get. You also get some fun like other perks, like fun little emojis and stuff like that. But another major perk you get is a shout out in every video. Speaking of which, here is the shout out to my current channel members. Thank you guys just so much for being my members. It really does just mean a lot to me that you guys are. And one itsy bitsy little way that I repay you guys for that is by giving you a shout out in these videos. So here's your shout out. And yeah, with that, thank you for watching. I really hope that you did enjoy the video, or at least found it insightful or fun in some way, shape, or form. And for your questions of the day, first question, what did you think of the video? What did you think of the rewrite? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Share your thoughts down in the comments. And for your second question, have you read the Silver Eyes and or the FNAF novel trilogy before? Is that something that you've read before? And if you haven't, then answer that down below there too. So just answer those 2 questions if you made it this far in the video. And with that, I will see you in tonight's live stream. Goodbye.